The members of the crew, from left to right, Chris Bainbridge, Tim Wheeldon, John Tolhurst and Barry Preston. Here we are, planning our journey. This is the route taken by our vessel James Brindley on her voyage over 240 miles of canal through the counties of Staffordshire, Shropshire, Cheshire, Flint and Denbigh. We start our journey at Stone on the Trent and Mersey Canal. First morning. Unfortunately, this keenness didn't last long. Leaving Stone. This is Great Hayward Junction, where the Staffordshire and Worcestershire Canal joins the Trent and Mersey. The bridge is famous for its unusually wide and graceful span. The parting of the ways. A canal community. Once prosperous warehouses, these Georgian buildings are now concerned with a new kind of business, pleasure boating. Another Brindley Canal, completed in 1772, the Staffs and Worcester connects the Trent and Mersey with the River Severn. A typical Brindley aqueduct. This carries the Staffs and Worcester across the Trent. This bridge is considered by many people to be one of the most beautiful in England. It was built by a former Earl of Essex to convey his hunt across the Trent and is situated just below Great Hayward. Known as Tixall Wide, this broadening of the canal into a sizable lake was done by a former Lord of Tixall to conceal the commercial waterway in his ornamental park. At Penkridge, south of Stafford, we pass these packet boats. They are very comfortable and have a crew, so passengers can do nothing for 2 or 3 weeks if they wish. A bridge on the Staffs and Worcester. These bridges are unique in that most of them have cast iron nameplates. This is Gailey Top Lock. The round lock cottage is unusual for this area, but occurs sometimes elsewhere, on the derelict Thames and Severn Canal for example. Here you can get a good picture of 2 forms of transport. Compare the lorries roaring by with the far more leisurely and peaceful pace of the canal, which we think is infinitely preferable. A member of the crew. Yours truly at the helm. Hatherton Junction. Here the Churchbridge branch goes up to the coalfields of Cannock Chase. Until 1952 this was an extremely busy section, but then for no reason at all British Waterways closed it. Today the coal goes by lorry and of course costs much more to transport. Refuelling. Canals are adequately provided with pubs and we were seldom thirsty. We are now approaching Ortherley, near Wolverhampton, our most southerly point. Ortherley Junction. Here we leave the Staffs and Worcester for the Shropshire Union Canal, or Shroppy Cut, which was built by Thomas Telford and completed in 1826. It was built as a quicker route between Birmingham and the Mersey, and has many cuttings, embankments and aqueducts. A cutting near Ortherley with a very pleasant reflection. Norbury Junction is the maintenance headquarters of many other canals of this area. At this junction, the branch to Shrewsbury and the Severn leaves the Shroppy. This is, or was, the first lock on the branch. It is now a dry dock. This canal was abandoned officially in 1944. Here is a good view of a derelict canal. This branch, like most other derelict canals, should never have been abandoned, as it is a beautiful waterway. A typical Telford embankment on the Shroppy. It could quite easily be a railway. Past Norbury, and the deep cuttings are spanned by bridges like these. This has an extra supporting span. This famous bridge is even higher and seems to leap airily across the gorge. Mr. Rolt described this as a solitary cottage and a true English inn. It is now nothing but a roadhouse. The Welsh section at last. Although part of the Shropshire Union system, British Waterways insist on calling it the Llangollen Canal. The canal had been extremely shallow up to here, and it was very encouraging to find this dredging going on. It is surprising how efficient this method is. It made a great deal of difference to our speed. This is near Wrenbury. Our first Shroppy drawbridge. At first sight it looked very heavy and cumbersome, but actually it was very easy to work. Whoops, try again. There she goes. These bridges are unique to our canal system, and compared with those on the Oxford Canal are very complicated. A rather unusual notice. This bridge is insufficient to carry a traction engine or any other extraordinary weight. A sight we saw many times on our journey and one of which we never grew tired. This is Grinley Brook. Here the 3 locks are arranged in a staircase, which means that the top gate of the lower lock is the bottom gate of the next one up, and so on. It makes it a little more complicated to work. Notice the brick ramps on the lock sides. These were to help the horses climb the steep slopes. Incidentally, this was one of the few fine days we had. One key member of the crew was actually wearing shorts. The boat entering the second lock up. Raising the paddles and filling the top lock. Stopped for supplies at the Shropshire village of Platt Lane. Here we met a garage attendant who hadn't yet seen a new £1 note. Captain and navigator. A wonderful sight we certainly never expected to see, a horseboat. This kind of traffic is now unfortunately almost extinct, except for some North Birmingham canals, and we were extremely lucky to come across this. Surprisingly enough, ducks are comparatively uncommon on canals. Crossing the first of the two great aqueducts, Chirk, was built by Telford in 1801. Chirk Tunnel, beyond the aqueduct, is 459 feet long, our longest so far. Here we are emerging from the north end of the tunnel. As you can gather, we are now in the foothills of the mountains, and it is remarkable how Telford built the canal right up to Llangollen with practically no change of level. This is a very peaceful scene. The second and greatest aqueduct, the Pont Cysylltu. Here we cross the River Dee. This amazing structure was built by Telford in 1805. About to make the crossing. Looking down the Dee Valley, and looking up the Vale of Llangollen. Auxiliary engines. This shows how shallow the canal really is up here beyond Llangollen. We have now reached the end of the canal. These horseshoe falls are beautiful, and were built to supply the canal with water. The Dee, now at our level, flows swiftly here, and we slept with its roar in our ears. Our farthest point reached. This is the end basin and pumping house. A nearby waterfall. Cut End is actually at Llantysilio, 2 miles beyond Llangollen, and we spent a delightfully peaceful night at this beautiful spot. This is one of the most westerly points of the main canal system. Here we are back in Llangollen at last, a famous view of the river from the 14th century bridge. The main street of the town. Although it is so close to the border, Llangollen is still a very Welsh town. It is really an inland resort, and the important event of the year is of course the Eisteddfod. Dominating Llangollen is Castle Dinas-Bran, and we duly trudged up its slopes. Centuries of legend has produced a very muddled picture as to its history. It is traditionally associated with Owain Glendower, who owned the whole valley. Dinas-Bran means the city of Bran, a king who once lived here. Its antiquity is unknown, but in its day the castle was impregnable, the hill being almost a perfect cone, looking down into England. The town, snuggling below Dinas-Bran, seeming as though it still looks up to it for protection. Coming down. As always, the descent was made a great deal quicker than the ascent. We're now on the way back and crossing the Pont Cysylltu again. The aqueduct carries the canal in a cast iron trough 120 feet above the river. It is one of the highlights of the whole canal system, and was one of its greatest features is its beauty combined with its perfectly functional design. The trip was not without its hazards. This tree came down only a couple of hours before we arrived. We are at Chirk Bank on the Welsh border near Chirk Aqueduct. Next morning a gang was soon on the job, and we found their work very entertaining. See what I mean? Abandon ship? Salvage operations. On with the good work. Oh, no accidents this time. Actually, they were a superb bunch of men, perfectly genuine with a wonderful sense of humour. It was an interesting day's break, but now we had to make up for lost time. We are now on our way up the 32 Cheshire locks. Notice they are arranged in duplicate. You can see we have left the Welsh section far behind and are now back on the Trent to Mersey after crossing Cheshire. Our new target is Macclesfield. We unexpectedly came across this in the Cheshire locks, the Thurlwood steel lock. After much struggling I found it was still locked. To fill or empty this lock, the gates are raised a little and the water goes under them. The bottom gate rising, the boat entering. As they were so heavy, the gates needed a terrific number of turns to wind them up. It was an interesting piece of mechanism, obviously experimental, and as we were novices it took us far longer to work, in spite of the complicated instructions alongside, than a conventional lock. Now on the Macclesfield Canal, we are crossing the Trent and Mersey, which we have just come up, a rather odd arrangement. Arriving at our second destination, Macclesfield, under two of Telford's unusual bridges. The canal approaches Macclesfield round the side of a hill, and is above most of the town, so you travel at rooftop level. Although its suburbs are rather industrial, as you can see, the centre of Macclesfield is very pleasant, with a marketplace and steep cobbled streets. We stayed here for one night, during which two members of the crew met some acquaintances, and then were off on the final leg of our journey back to Stone and home. An interesting feature of this canal, which incidentally was in fairly good condition, were these simple swing bridges. Back on the Trent and Mersey, we now come to another highlight of the voyage, the Harecastle tunnels. The old tunnel on the right was built by Brindley in 1777 and was the first canal tunnel. It was replaced by Telford's larger one in 1827. Here we go. The tunnel is 1 mile 159 yards long, and subsidence has caused the roof to sink in the middle. Our engine also began to play up, and it was quite an experience jerking our way through. Daylight at last. Nearly there. Phew, fresh air. The tunnel has a square south entrance because a large door with a fan for ventilation, it was full of fumes, has been installed. Approaching the potteries of Stoke, we now come to yet another side of canal scenery, industry. Here you see a sight so typical of the potteries, the ovens, that look like huge squat milk bottles. This part of the canal is quite busy. Here are some narrowboats loading, and although they are in the comparatively dull colours of British waterways, you can see a traditional painted can on the cabin roof. One of the many warehouses on the canal. Another industry. This is the steel works at Hanley. The canal goes right through it, and it is an amazing sight when it is going full blast. The top block of the flight down into Stoke, Etruria Lock, has a roof which is very unusual. Here we were joined by another returning boat. And so to Stone, and the end of 2 fascinating weeks as we approach our journey's end.